Good morning, everyone. This is Trisha Allen. I'm filling in for Theresa Cozart, our adult services librarian. Welcome to the final Master Gardeners event of our season, Companion Planting. Please hold any person questions to the end of the presentation, or if you're joining us in Zoom, you can send them in the chat and I will get them to the presenter at the end.
Okay, I'm putting this on. Can you help me? I can't see. Put this on. I can't see to put it on. Is there momentarily?
Great.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning. My name is Lois Chatham, and I'm a Dare Extension Master Gardener volunteer. And today we are going to talk about companion planting. And companion planting is actually best described as the practice of planting two or more plants together to enhance the growth and quality of your plants, to provide maximum ground cover, and hopefully to help improve nearby soil. It is a great way to use your space efficiently, giving you more availability to put flowers and vegetables together in mutually beneficial arrangements. And also it may protect your most prized plants from insects. So there's a lot of things that it can do for you. Now, while some companion planting practices are a result of knowledge that has been passed down from generation to generation, others sometimes are harder to pinpoint. But companion planting is actually one of the oldest gardening traditions out there. Over 10,000 years ago in China, they planted mosquito fern with rice because that acted as a green manure to increase the production of rice. Ancient Romans and Greeks used companion plants to enhance the grapes for winemaking. And there was a useful technique that was started with the Native Americans called the Three Sisters technique. Now, this involved planting three different yet correlating plants side by side. And it could have been corn, pole beans, and squash, where the corn acted as the structure for the pole beans to grow strong and healthy. The pole beans was used to help make nitrogen more available for plant use. And your squash acted as your ground cover to keep weeds at bay. So a very successful method to increase the production of all of your plants. So each plant had its own unique benefit in this type of an arrangement. The corn for its structure, the pole beans for the nitrogen production, and the squash for the ability to keep weeds at bay. So very useful way of using a small area to have more plants. Companion planting can also help you achieve some important goals in your garden. It can boost the growth of plants, resulting in a larger harvest of your plants. It may improve the flavor of many fruits and vegetables. It can help to repel pests. And it definitely makes more efficient use of your garden space and allows you to have more diversity in your garden. Cover crops such as red clover, although you can see by this picture it's not really red, it's kind of a pink purple in color. And legumes such as I can't even talk this morning, beans, peas, they have the ability to provide nitrogen to themselves and also to nearby plants. They fix the atmospheric nitrogen from the air by a relationship with a particular bacteria that is in their root nodules. And this bacteria then converts the nitrogen into a form that plants can use. So they are very beneficial when you are planting them with certain plants. This also enables nearby plants to produce more protein and more growth, which helps to improve soil health. Companion planting allows you to tap into the benefits of having different root systems in your garden. Plants with tap roots, such as carrots and radishes, can help alleviate soil compaction issues. Planting them side by side is a great example of space saving in your garden. Not only is it efficient, but it can help with weed management and soil health by keeping living roots in the soil and a plant canopy above the soil surface. Deep-rooted crops, such as asparagus and watermelon, have the ability to pull nutrients and water from deeper in the soil profile. And so therefore it can help your plants in that manner. Companion planting can improve the flavor of many fruits and vegetables. A proven winner is planting basil with tomatoes, because that is said to enhance the flavor of tomatoes. German chamomile, which has a very strong aroma, is believed to improve the growth and flavor of cabbages, cucumbers, and onions. A concept called increased level interaction means that one crop is planted over top of another crop, and this can act as a shade or actually protection from birds in your garden. This is useful where space is limited and multiple crops are wanted. Consider planting smaller cool season crops such as spinach, beets, or lettuce in between larger slow growing crops such as tomatoes or peppers. Once the smaller crops mature, the larger plants will provide shade. Many of you probably have heard about square foot gardening, and that involves the practice of planting many different types of plants within a very small area. Now, it could be using containers or even a raised bed garden, or just an area in your yard that is a smaller area. Growing several different plants in a small area benefits plants as well as gardeners, as it can produce much higher yields while using less space. Companion planting can also be utilized having a large container garden, and that can help maximize crops' yield and space. So you might want to consider planting a salad garden where you would have your tomatoes, your peppers, your maybe oregano, lettuce, basil, all planted within one large container. Another example would be maybe a pizza garden using some of the same types of vegetables. I know we all like pizza, don't we? Yeah. Companion gardening also allows for some great pest control, which can save money over buying and using potentially harmful insecticides. Trap cropping is a method that uses a plant to attract a type of harmful insect. It is planted near a crop that needs, that needs protection from these harmful insects. The insects are then drawn away from the beneficial crop and to the crop that has been planted as a trap for them. A great example is nasturtium. That is actually a food of caterpillars, which feed on cabbages. So by planting the nasturtium close to the cabbages, it will protect your cabbage plants, and it will allow those caterpillars to lay the eggs will be laid on the trap plant, which is the nasturtium, and not on your cabbages. Another example is planting dill with tomatoes. The tomato hornworm, which can be a real problem, they actually prefer the dill. So by planting them together, they're going to be more attracted to the dill than they are to your tomatoes. So a great example of companion planting. Another beneficial method of pest control is host finding suppression. Now, plant feeding insects, especially those that feed on only one or a very few types of plants, they find their host plants by sight and smell. And these senses can be disrupted by surrounding plants, especially those that are aromatic or bushy. Rosemary is a great example because it repels many harmful insects as well as attracting beneficial insects. A great plant to have close by. Flying pests are less successful if your host plant is surrounded by these decoy plants because that flying pest will come in and land on a plant that is not the right plant. They'll take off, try again. If it happens too many times, they'll go find something else. The scents and bright colors of herbs and flowers repel and confuse harmful pests. Catnip actually deters aphids, ants, Japanese beetles, weevils, and mice. This plant is bushy with light green leaves and dark purple flowers, and it is very attractive as well as being functional. A great plant to have. I'm sure many of us have heard about marigolds being planted to help repel various plants. Planting marigolds along vegetable garden rows actually benefits their edible neighbors by repelling those flying insects. The African marigold is well known for their ability to control nematodes due to a toxic chemical called thiopene that is exuded by their roots. However, this is more effective if it is planted as a cover crop and then tilled into the soil before the other crop is planted. Roses tend to attract Japanese beetles. So consider planting some old-fashioned 4 o'clocks nearby to attract those beetles to the other plant. The scents and bright colors of herbs and flowers can also attract beneficial insects and pollinators, which help to keep those pests under control. Companion plants that produce large amounts of nectar and pollen will attract higher populations of these beneficial insects and pollinators. Examples would be coriander, onions, leeks, garlic, Queen Anne's lace, and chives. But you want to leave the flowers on your plants to attract these insects. Do not cut those flowers down. Remember, these are going to be plants that you are using as a trap plant, not necessarily that you are using it to eat. Because typically you don't want it to flower if you're using it for consumption. Some flowers actually support alternate prey for natural enemies. For example, marigolds often support numerous tiny pests called thrips, which in turn are fed on by tiny voracious predatory bugs that are beneficial, that are called minute pirate bugs. These minute pirate bugs will patrol nearby plants as well, thus reducing large populations of those harmful soft-bodied pests. And when we're talking about soft-bodied pests, we're talking a lot about aphids and things of that nature. Something to consider if you are planting vegetables is crop rotation. This means relocating your crops to a different part of the garden each year. This will help to minimize disease. It will discourage insect infestations. It will help to deter weeds and improve soil fertility. It may help to reduce erosion and definitely the need to use a lot of chemicals. So you need to ensure that the succeeding year's crops are a completely different family from the previous year's crop. An example would be the repeated planting of potatoes, sunflowers, or safflowers in the same spot year after year. This can actually lead to an extensive spread of verticillium fungus, which can kill off the entire crop for the season and may even affect future crops. So another thing to keep in mind. Now, when you're looking for companion plants, there are various factors that you need to consider. And one of the factors is called the hardiness zone. And I think if you've come to many of our programs, you hear us talking about that just about every program that we give. It is a system that the USDA developed to help you know whether or not, or it's kind of a rough guide as to whether or not your plant is going to survive the winter. And you can see by this chart, it was just recently updated. This is our 2023 plant hardiness chart, and it gives the various zones. Sometimes it's hard to look at the color and see, but you can tell by looking at this that those that are kind of goldish color are closer to the ocean, and the further inland you get, it changes color, which means it starts getting colder. Now, we were recently upgraded in Dare County. Our zone now is 9A, which means that the average minimum temperature is going to be between 20 and 25 degrees. We actually did have some 24-degree weather in early February. Now, typically we don't have that for a long period of time, but we can get some cold weather. Interesting enough, our neighboring county of Currituck is in zone 8B, which means that they get about 5 degrees colder than we do. They're a little further inland from us. So when you're looking for plants and it tells you what zone they are rated for, if it is 9A, that tells us it's still okay. They're more warmer season plants than the lower numbers. So that is a good way to look at it. Another thing to consider is how long is your winter season? How long does that cold weather last? The force of your winds. And as you know, we get lots of nor'easters. In fact, we just had one, and that tends to make it a lot colder when you have those, because the air temperature may only say that it's 40, but with those winds, it actually feels like it's in the 30s. So that's a factor to keep in mind. Another is the depth of the roots, and also the amount of moisture that is in the soil at the time of the first frost. Now, in our area, the first frost is going to be somewhere between mid and late November. Kind of changes depending on how warm it is at the time. So that is something to keep in mind. Another is microclimate. Now, what does that mean? Actually, microclimate is defined as a small place that is within a larger macroclimate. For instance, your yard is your macroclimate. But perhaps you have an area of your yard that is more protected from the winds and the frost. And so it doesn't get that cold as some of your other areas. That would be considered a microclimate. Also, if you have your garden up by your house, walls tend to absorb the sun's energy and heat, and that heat radiates out into the soil. So the area up close to your house is probably going to be a little warmer than it is in other parts of your yard. That is considered a microclimate. The amount of sun that plants receive in a day is very important. Most plants are going to need 6 to 8 hours of sunlight every day, even in the spring and the fall. Plants that are exposed to the east get that nice sun in the morning, which is cooler, and then they are shaded in the afternoon. Plants with a western exposure are shaded in the morning, and they get that hot, intense sun in the afternoon. Now, it also indicates most of the time when you buy a plant, whether it needs to be in sun or shade. If it says full sun, that means they need at least 6 hours of direct sunlight every day. If it says partial sun or partial shade, those are plants that you would have with an eastern exposure that gets the morning sun, not that hot, intense sun. Or it may be plants that you have under some tree limbs that gets dappled sunlight, but not, it does get some. Or maybe those that, are on the north side of that's full shade. So those are plants that are under a trellis, something of that nature. If it says full shade, then those are going to be plants that you do not want to have sun at all. perhaps under a lot of trees where it doesn't get sun, or on the north side of your house because it gets light, but it does not get any sun. Nutrient needs are also very important because some vegetables deplete the soil of particular nutrients. Sweet corn is an example because it is a heavy feeder that takes a lot of nitrogen from the soil. So planting climbing beans at the base of each stalk will help to fix that nitrogen from the air into the soil, thus helping your corn. Legumes like peas should be planted with nitrogen-hungry vegetables such as cabbage, broccoli, or cauliflower. That helps fix the nutrients for them. Placing plants with different root structures together can help to aerate your soil and allow plants to pull nutrients from different parts of the soil profile. Soil is another thing that you need to consider when you are planting anything. Now, soils may consist of clay, loam, sand, rock, that type of thing. And you need to know what type of soil you have before you get started. Now, I know many of us have come from other parts of the country, and our soil here is very different than what you had in other parts of the country. If you have what you're going to do to determine your soil is dig a hole, pour a bucket of water in. If you have hard clay soil, it isn't going to drain at all. It's just going to stay right there. If you have loose clay soil, it will drain, but it may take 3 hours or more for that to happen. If you have a loamy soil, it may drain within 15 minutes or less. And if you have complete sand, you can't even fill that hole up. Think about going to the beach and trying to have a moat around the sandcastle that you built. It will not happen. So you need to know what type of soil you have. And if any of you have tried gardening here, you know that here on the Outer Banks, we have very sandy soil. And so we always recommend that before you plant that you amend your soil with compost. That will help to retain moisture for your plants. Now, another area that you need to think about is soil pH. Now, the acidity of soil is important, and that is what pH refers to. And that is important because that affects the release of nutrients and also has an impact on worm and microorganism activity within the soil. So you need to know what you have before you start your garden. You need to know what type of soil you have. You need to know whether it's going to be in the sun or the shade. And you need to know how rich your soil is. How do you know how rich your soil is? That's a question a lot of people give us. Well, what you need to do is, if you are interested in knowing what is going to be best for your garden, is have your soil tested. And the North Carolina Extension Office in Manteo has soil test kits available. Actually, we have some here. And what happens is you just dig up some soil, put it in this little box, and you fill out the form, and you tell them what you're planning to put in that area. Now, if you're thinking of having like a vegetable garden, and then maybe you want to plant some flowers in a different area, or perhaps a shrub or something that you don't know whether it needs to have a lot of acid in the soil or not, then you're going to need to do separate test kits. And they are available, as I said, at the Extension Office in Manteo year-round. I have some available today that you can take with you. We also have them available Wednesday mornings from 9 to 11 at our Ask a Master Gardener table, which is at the Outer Banks Arboretum, located at the Baum, right outside the Baum Center. So March through November, you can always go there on Wednesday morning and get these soil test kits. You send it in, and they will send you back information as to what you need to put into your soil to benefit the plants that you intend to put there. A great way of knowing what you need to do. Now, during the months of April through November, there is no cost to have this done. From December through the end of March, there is a $4 cost. And I think that probably is because they are so very busy during that period of time from the farmers across North Carolina trying to get their soil tested to know what they need to do to benefit their upcoming crops. So my suggestion is, if you take this kit today, don't send it in tomorrow. Wait till next week when it will be April. Water requirements also vary from plant to plant, and water availability varies from garden to garden. One thing to keep in mind is when you're choosing plants that you look at their water needs, because you do not want to plant a plant that requires a lot of water with something that doesn't want water, because one of those plants is going to suffer. So keep that in mind when you're choosing your plants. What plant?
Yeah.
There are a lot of drought-tolerant plants that do not want you to water very often. They do need some water.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a good question, Barbara.
Sorry to interrupt.
So, no, that's fine. And then you have to consider your soil, because some soil is porous, and if you haven't amended it, it's going to require more water. And so you have to think about all of these conditions. Another thing you need to think about is the availability of your water. How far away from your faucet, excuse me, how far away from your faucet is your garden? Is it something that requires water every day? Does that mean you have to drag a hose out every day? Maybe you should think about having some drip irrigation and factor that in. So think of these things when you are trying to decide what you are going to do, where it's going to be, that type of thing. The pollen season is getting to me. Now, if you're looking to garden for color, you might want to consider some of these tips to have a long season filled with beautiful blooms. First, you want to determine a color scheme. Now, this chart kind of gives you some suggestions that you might want to consider choosing 2 plants that have colors from one side of the color wheel, and then that go to the opposite side and do a complementary color from the other side. And I think you'll agree by looking at this chart that it's very pleasing to look at that. So rather than just choosing everything with all the same color, give it some interest. You want to have a wide variety of plants. So don't just plant one type of plant. Think about using annuals, perennials, bulbs, a rose bush maybe flowering or an evergreen shrub, maybe even a small tree is going to help that particular area. And consider your season, because if you are planting for color, you probably want to have some interest all year long, or at least during the growing season. So plant the flowers that will bloom spring, summer, and fall, and then have a plant in there that will give it some interest during the winter. Maybe it is one of those plants that changes the color of its leaves, or maybe one that just has an interesting shape that you can see in the winter time. So think about those types of things. And then you want to use 1 or 2 bold plants to give it a focal point. Now, when you're choosing companion plants, these are going to be primarily for vegetables that you are looking at. You may want to attract beneficial insects to these plants, or you may want to repel those that are harmful. So it is possible to grow plants that attract these good insects to your plants. Some easily attainable good plants are asters, goldenrod, bachelor buttons, black-eyed Susan, morning glory, sunflowers, zinnias. A lot of plants out there will attract a lot of these beneficial insects. And if you are trying to repel some of those harmful insects, remember what we talked about with trap crops. These are the plants that you want to plant with a crop that you really want. And most times this is going to be vegetables, where you're trying to pull and attract that insect away from your vegetable and put it with a plant. And so you can have plants that do that as well. Nasturtiums are a great plant for trapping aphids. And as I mentioned earlier, they are a food plant for caterpillars. So a great plant to have in your vegetable garden. Now, there are a lot of plants out there that will repel certain harmful pests. These are really just a few. And if you are thinking of trying to get rid of aphids, I think aphids tend to be a common problem with a lot of people. You might want to consider nasturtium, peppermint, clover, or catnip. These will all attract the aphid and perhaps keep it away from your other plants. Or if you know you have problems with slugs, think about planting some fennel, garlic, or rosemary. But there are a lot of plants out there. These are just a very few. I see people writing down, so I'm just going to give it just a second. Okay. And then, as I said, there are also plants that help improve the flavor of fruits and vegetables. Again, these are just a very few. I know everybody loves tomatoes. As you hear, everybody says, I got to have a tomato plant for the summertime. So if you are hoping to enhance the flavor of that tomato, you might want to consider planting basil, chives, sage, or thyme close by, because all of those are said to enhance the flavor of your tomatoes. And if you have strawberries, sage and thyme, yeah, I had to look at the chart. Sage and thyme also enhances the flavor of strawberries as well. The number of rigorous scientific studies regarding companion planting is relatively small compared to the number of books, lists, charts, YouTube programs out there that are based on anecdotal evidence. And master gardeners only use scientific information. We do not use the anecdotal evidence. And so a lot of times it's very difficult to get some of that information. Now, if you are thinking of having a companion garden, choose some of those resources. I will give that to you in a second. But even read some of the books that are out there and see what other people are saying about companion planting. Each garden is going to be different. Don't be concerned if it doesn't work out the first time. A lot of times it's trial and error. So do some research. There are many books within the library that will talk about that. And so therefore, do some research first before you do that. But in conclusion, the scientists have found that there are definite benefits by adding diversity to your garden, primarily because certain plants will attract and support beneficial insects that either help to control pests or to help pollinate your crops. Now, these are some of the resources that we used when we created this program today. And I'm going to leave this up here for a while and open it up for questions. I'm sure some of you do have some questions. Any questions from our Zoom people? Yeah, take a snapshot of it. It's the easiest thing to do.
Well, can we take you out on loan?
Can you take me out on loan?
Come to you make house calls.
Unfortunately, we do not make house calls. And
You go to
But if you
Questions
have,
on Wednesday.
if you do not have a question right this moment, question is, do we go out and make house calls? No, Master Gardeners do not go out and make house calls. However, we are always available for questions. We have an Ask a Master Gardener hotline that I'm going to show you in just a moment, but I wanted to leave this up for a minute so that you all could either write that down or take a snapshot of it.
There's another good book called Carrots. Tomatoes Love Carrots, or Carrots Love Tomatoes.
Yeah.
And that's really an excellent.
Okay,
companion.
the comment from the audience, this is for our Zoom people, is that there is a great book out there called Carrots Love Tomatoes and Tomatoes Love Carrots. And I think Megan is checking to see if it's something that's in our library. Do you know? We happen to have some library people here. So you'll find a lot of books within the library that are going to be helpful. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and switch it to the other slide that gives you our contact information. If you have calls, you can contact us at 252-475-9245, or you can email us at greenlineobx@gmail.com, and we will get back with you. If you want to come see us in person, we are there Wednesdays from 9 to 11 during the months of March through the middle of November, and it is going to be just outside the Outer Banks Arboretum, which happens to be right next to the Thomas A. Baum Senior Center, for those of you that may not be familiar with where that is. And thank you, Donnie. We also have once a month, we have what we call our Manio Mondays, that we have someone at our extension office in Manio there to answer your questions. So, see, I don't know all of these things. It's going to be the first Monday of the month from 9 to 11. Thank you, Donnie.
In the same time period?
9 to 11,
No,
yes.
but March to November, or? is it
Yes,
every month?
yes, it would be the same time. It would be the same time period, because that's usually the growing months. Yes. Okay, the question that we got from Zoom: would planting marigolds around a crepe myrtle help repel aphids? Well, they do repel aphids, do they not? So therefore, it should help to repel them. I don't know how successful they will be, since they are so low to the ground, and the crepe myrtle is up here, and that may not be quite as successful, but it may help somewhat. I don't know. I mean, just thinking logistically, there's just a lot of distance between the two. Any other questions? I'm thinking there are some more from Zoom. Well, while we're waiting on that question, I also am going to tell you of an opportunity to maybe get some of these companion plants that are grown locally. You have this on your chair. If you have not been to the Coastal Gardening Festival, we have a huge plant sale that Master Gardeners has grown every one of these plants. We do not purchase them from other places. We either divide things that are in our yard, we grow them from seed, but and we have a lot of different plants that are available. And I do know that we have, I believe we have some marigolds that are going to be there, some goldenrods, usually have sunflowers. We have a lot of the different plants the plants that we usually have are going to be those plants that do very well here on the Outer Banks. And that's what we're sharing with you. So that is going to be May 18th. It's on the grounds of the Baum Center from 9 to 2. Okay, another question from Zoom. To be a companion to a vegetable garden, are there native wildflowers that would attract beneficial pollinators? A very good question. Chris, do you have the answer to that? Just because I'm a master gardener does not mean that I know it all. Native wildflowers, that's the key there.
That's it. Yeah, they should mail that question to the Green Line.
Yeah. This is a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would have to go through and look at our list.
And Queen Anne's
Well,
Place,
right,
Queen
that's
Anne's
late
Place.
in the season, and I'm thinking. Yeah.
Lantana is not a native. That is not a native. What I would suggest to the individual that asked this question on Zoom is that you use the greenlineobx@gmail.com email and send it to them, and they will do the research and get back to you. Because the key here is knowing, having to think about what is actually native on this. And there are going to be several out there.
Yarrow and Queen Anne's Lace, they're native plants and they do attract.
Queen Anne's lace and yarrow are native plants, and they do attract beneficial pollinators. So that is a great question, but it also requires more research than we can just give you the answer today. But a great, great question.
If you let the Queen Anne's Lace dry, let the flowers dry, it self-seeds incredibly. I propagate it a lot that way, and you'll have to like pull some of them out. It really seeds easily.
Any other questions? Yes, there's a question here. Okay, the question is, when you do a soil test kit, get one of those, do you mail it in or take it to Manio? You actually mail them in and it gives you the information on that sheet of paper. When you look at your form, it will tell you, okay? Any other questions? Okay, before I say goodbye, I want to tell you about an activity that the library is putting on that is sounds very interesting. It's the first annual edible book contest. And we have, I think, some forms over here that you can take home. And they are doing this in honor of National Library Week, April the 7th through the 13th. And what they're doing is it's a chance to show off your creativity and play with your food. I guess all of the information is going to be on the back as to, okay, each edible creation must be a representation of a fiction or nonfiction book. It sounds very interesting. And a photo of each entry will be on display all week. And this is at the Kill Devil Hills Library and also the Hatteras Library.
Can it be a painting as well as a?
Well, these are questions that you will have to address to the library. Since this is a library program, I'm not sure what all of the requirements are, but it sounds like a lot of fun. Sounds like it should be fun. Okay, any other questions? Well, unfortunately, this is our, there's another question up here. Okay, the question is, everybody heard that? Okay. Is it true that they prefer to be planted in the same place each year? No, that is not accurate. I mean, they really don't care where they're going to plant them. And some of them, particularly some of the different vegetables, like I mentioned on the potatoes, you do not want to plant them in the same place each year, because that can lead to that fungus, the verticillium fungus. Yes.
Are there some exceptions to that for things like asparagus? That stays in the ground.
Are there some exceptions to that rule, like asparagus, which is a root vegetable that stays in the ground? And yes, there are some exceptions to those. There's always exceptions to everything. So those are perennials. Those are considered perennials. It's not something you're planting year after year. No, you do not want to move those. Was there another question over here? Well, unfortunately, this is the last of our winter library garden series. And so I thank you all for attending, and especially those of you that may have attended multiple programs, but don't despair. We have more opportunities. We have what we call our summer series, and once a month we will hold a little session in the Arboretum with a topic. And if you're interested in knowing what those topics are, I have to refer it to Chris. She's in charge of.
You know, June 13th, we're having an arborist.
June 13th, we're having an arborist to come and talk about trees.
At 11 o'clock.
At 11 o'clock in the Arboretum. And then, of course, we will come back in the fall and do another series with the library in the fall as well. So lots of opportunities, lots of opportunities. And I hope to see all of you at the Coastal Gardening Festival.